How's it going, Roberta?
Hey, Josh.
How y'all doing?
Doing good. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm fantastic. We are live now,
Hey
just so
everyone.
everybody knows. Hope everybody can hear me.
I was picking you up on Facebook. What was that all about? I had to,
Is this still there on Facebook?
well, it was. I clicked out of it.
Let me
I
see if
just-
it's on there on Facebook now. So for everybody else watching, we should be on Facebook now. Yeah, looks like we are.
Doing
Ooh,
good.
let me get that turned off. That's so loud. So I'm trying something new here where it's going to YouTube and Facebook at this point. People have been trying to get me to go to multiple platforms, and I think I can add several more using something called a Restream, to where it's going, instead of just going to YouTube, it's going to Facebook as well. And then we'll try to add some other things like Periscope and whatnot, or Twitch. I don't know what else is out there. Vimeo. We'll try as many as we can. This is going to be trying to be a branching out year, trying to add some things to the channel, features and whatnot, content features, that sort of stuff. So are we ready to talk about Ephesians 4?
Sure.
That sounds exciting. Has anybody got a chance to do some study on the passage? Well, anyway, as we go, what I would like as we move forward is for people who have done some study on the passage to share with the rest of us what your perspectives are, what you've looked at, what your thoughts are as we're going through. One of the benefits of you knowing what passage we're looking at is so that you can look at it in advance and have something to bring to the table rather than just be surprised when you get here. like a big impromptu thing. I gotta turn a fan on in here. I forgot to turn a fan on. Just a second. I'm surrounded by lights and monitors, and it all gets real hot. So we're in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 17. As we are looking at this, one of our goals, and this should mix in pretty well. Yesterday, I started a new set of videos called Transformation-Oriented Edification. So in Ephesians 4, we have the model, like the modality and the facilitation of edification. What we're trying to do with that series is take a look at what we're trying to accomplish with the edification. What is it that we're aiming for, like at the end of an edification session, whether it's a one hour session or a 3-year session, of interactive edification. What's the goal? What are we trying to make out of ourselves and other people with edification? And we got a comment that was illustrative today on the YouTube channel. Somebody asked me for, I don't know who all saw this, but somebody asked me for a flow chart that shows Calvinist arguments and then objections to those arguments, and then what their objection to that would be, and then further answers to that. And I kind of couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't tell if the guy was joking or not, because I think we've been pretty clear on this channel that that's exactly what we are against. If y'all remember when Larry came on the channel, right? I'm going to have him back on, I think, sometime next week. And I was talking to him on the phone today, and he was telling me about some Calvinist friends that he had, and they literally said this. They literally said, well, we don't ever have to think about that because that's all been settled for us. They literally said that. And that is not what we want to do. If I make a flow chart, you don't ever have to think, and you just memorizing answers and responses. It's a formula. You're being programmed. You're being programmed with a script, and you are not becoming wise. And when you interact with somebody, and this is what I'm hoping Ephesians 4 does for us, when you interact with somebody, there's lots of different things you might be trying to accomplish, and that is going to shape your answer, that mixed with whatever wisdom you bring to the table. See, you might be trying to answer a Calvinist or anybody that disagrees with you about anything. You might be trying to answer them for your own sense of security and feeling of having an answer and certainty, that sort of thing. You might be trying to answer them to correct them in front of, as far as somebody else is concerned, or you might be trying to answer them to get them out of Calvinism, or you might be trying to answer them to get them to think and reconsider, like not just show them that what they're thinking is wrong, but have an investigative conversation that tries to figure out why they are thinking what they're thinking, rather than just demonstrate to them that it's wrong. There's a whole bunch of different goals in mind right there. And depending on what your goal is, every answer in any one of those domains is going to be very different, very, very different answers. And a lot of those answers are going to be questions. And we're also going to be trying to avoid sophistry. So that kind of thing. So and then we want to raise people to the capacity where they can exercise wisdom in those kinds of encounters. And I believe that there is wisdom in each individual that I cannot impart to you, that can only come from within you. And it's important, like maybe you are the person talking to that Calvinist or whoever for a reason. And I can't give that to you. I can't give that capacity to you. That has to be something that you can strive for. And maybe I can play a role in helping generate that capacity, but I can't provide that for you in a flow chart. It doesn't work that way. There's nothing static. A flow chart is static. It's on a sheet of paper. It's not changing. It's just a program, a script, a formula. Somebody else wrote it. It'd be like asking me for a flow chart. It'd be like asking me to program you. Be my cult leader and brainwash me to make me say these particular things. Like those old catechisms, if you read some of those old, like the Catholic catechisms and some of the old Protestant catechisms, they have sections of objections and answers, a formula that you're supposed to remember before you get confirmed within that denomination. That's just absolutely the thing that we're trying to avoid having to have. So the goal of edification, what we're looking at here is to try to raise those capacities, operate in a wise way. All right. So that's the goal. Now this is the first time that I am using this service. So I may have a couple of technical pauses to see what's going on to make sure everything is on track. And it seems like everything is on track. And we'll see. Technically. All right. All right. Any comments so far before we start looking at the text from anybody on any of that? Yeah, Josh.
No, I think when you talk about programming, I think of NPC, non-player characters, ideologically possessed, and for someone to want a flow chart like that, it is going against everything that we're trying to do.
Yes.
To cultivate our spiritual life, experiencing the numinous, anti-fragility. What was one of the other topics you talked about yesterday on your video? Not just outsourcing your sense making, but there's so many things, and I don't know that it's that easy. I don't know that communicating what we're aiming at, what we're after, is something that could just be put out there propositionally. I know for myself, I had to question everything. There had to be some kind of an experience in my life.
Yep.
And so it's going to be difficult for a lot of people to come to this channel and just really try to have an open mind about experiencing the numinous and understanding the difference between chronos and was it kairos?
Kairos, yeah.
Yep. There's so many different things that we have to be thinking about. And if we're just foregrounding ourselves in propositional statements of faith, we're not going anywhere. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, if we're asking for a flow chart, it's like playing the game Zelda. It's like being Link and then asking to become an NPC. I want to be the little old man gnome over there who tells you what you got to go grab in the temple, and that's all I wanted to. You reduce your agency. You can no longer participate and have any impact on the environment or surroundings of the game or achieve anything. You just a cog in a wall. You're a human face on an inanimate program is what you become. You become essentially an inanimate object when we subject ourselves to static things that don't move. Wow. Yes, Ruth.
This isn't as deep as Josh. This is just a quote that I thought is actually quite applicable, especially to last week. And this author is quoting John Stott, and he says, John Stott in one of his books says it won't do to have a person perched on a pulpit. John Stott being an Anglican minister and a very dear brother in the Lord, he says that when you read on a church notice board, minister Melms or whatever, that can't be right. It ought to read ministers, all members of the church.
Yeah.
That's what John Stott said, but that was quite applicable to
That's
this.
Great. Where did you read that?
It's on a preacher I like to follow. He's long gone, but it's one of the quotes that he had in one of his messages pertaining to Ephesians 4.
Okay. I mean, is it like in a book or something or online?
Yeah, it's on a website here.
Okay.
I can send it to you.
So John Stott said that.
John Stott in one of his books, and it doesn't quote which book. I'm going to lose battery. I have to get my plug in here. 1 sec.
So when some of y'all mentioned citations and books and authors and stuff like that, tonight I will get 3 or 4 emails from people at least, and tomorrow probably a couple more asking what that resource was again and where it can be gotten and stuff like that. So if y'all have good resources like that, I'll stick them in the description or something so people can scroll down and get them. Make it easy for when they hear them. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Ministers, everybody's the minister. And I would like to think of the overseer, like the pastor, is maybe a facilitator of the ministry. Somebody's got to make sure that the thing's happening appropriately and make sure that everybody's involved and gain the capacity to be involved. So we're not saying that there's not going to be an overseer or a bishop type figure, but they're not the only ones talking and they're not the only ones edifying. They're just keeping everything decent and in order to make sure that it can happen, you know? So
one more thing, Kevin.
yeah,
I just really appreciated your analogy yesterday for mesh network topology, and you know the opposite would be like the broadcast mode.
yeah.
Like for me, that's really easy to see. But again, even if you can use Ephesians 4:13 through 16 and get someone to understand the difference between the broadcast and the mesh network topology, getting them to stop wanting that propositional certainty is still something that I just don't know how to just really articulate that
Hard.
well.
It's hard to convey. Very hard to convey. And also, once people need to be introduced to the idea, typically for months before they start to get a sense of it in their own life. I know that was the case with me. And I suspect probably others also. But and a lot of these ideas are that way. It takes a while for these things to kind of marinate, and then you have to have the idea in your head so that you can reorganize the reality to which you're exposed, so that that idea is then foregrounded. And when you foreground living with non-certainty, and you realize certainty you thought you had was an illusion anyway, you get to spend some time dealing with that idea. And people have to go through that. They have to go through that time. They have to spend that time. So it's not like you can just have one discussion or debate and convince a person or a group of people that a particular thing is true. There's certain things that you have to transform through experience a good bit before you can grasp the concept, and you have to kind of put it to action, like taste and see that the Lord is good. You have to put it into action to start to kind of see the thing. So Ephesians chapter 4, last week occasions, we was in, we passed up. Now, typically we really hone in on the transition of verses 13 through 16, right? And how this edification modality is different. You have the broadcast modality here, and maybe even when you have the next one, you have to start here, and then people need to transition and grow to where they can participate in this kind of edification modality, where everybody can be a transmitter and a receiver. So you are transmitting, right? And you're speaking the truth in love, and you are hearing and being edified, right? And then like Colossians says, speaking to yourselves in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, teaching and admonishing one another in the Lord. So everybody is involved in the teaching and admonishing part. So when we go past this, what we find in the following verses is that if you look at this edification modality, it's like the rest of the verses are kind of giving you a how-to or some case in points pointing toward this. And I think these verses that follow are easier to understand if you see them through the lens of what was just said. Now I think that's kind of a pointer for a lot of things that Paul says. Paul's constantly stacking ideas on top of ideas, and he's cascading a series of thoughts that need to be nested within each other in order to get the point. And so what follows starting verse 17 and following, this I say, therefore what? Because of what I just said, therefore, in order to do this edification modality, consider all this stuff. It makes it possible for you to do that edification modality. And so last week we looked at verses 17 through 18. I'll just read them here, and I won't go into the notes, but just to show in the upper right-hand corner for those following along at home, we looked at notes and we had comments from other people, and some of these notes are kind of long in the upper right-hand corner there. So we looked at some of these notes, and we're not going to look at those again specifically tonight, but we kind of looked at those. So verse 17 says, this I say therefore, and testify in the Lord, that ye henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind. And we compared that to like a game A kind of thing, walking in ideological possession, in paradigmatic thinking, and in institutionally normative types of ideas in groups, that kind of thing. Game A. Having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them because of the blindness of their heart. So they can participate in what looks like information exchange all day long, but they're never going to have exposure to the logos in doing so, because they're passing around flowcharts, more or less, rather than growing in wisdom. Who being past feeling have given themselves over to lasciviousness, to work all uncleanness with greediness. So they're looking out for themselves. And the feeling, we talked about discernment coming in, how discernment is connected to a person's feelings, emotions, and whatnot, how you're not a slave to your emotions, but they can be calibrated to the point where they can be an asset to your sense making. And then once you learn how your body works, you can also train yourself to overcome being made defensive when you don't want to be, for example. And then verse 20, but ye have not so learned Christ. And what I'll do here is I will read verse 21, and then I'm going to look at the note that I took on verse 21, and then we're going to open up the floor to see what other comments you guys have on verses 20 and 21. So if so be that ye have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus. So I have the note that I have here is, if you have tuned your receiver to pick up the signal of the creative principle that is being broadcasted in all directions now. If so be that ye have heard him. Once you learn to spot the logos, you can start to hear it everywhere. You can start to hear it in TV shows. Somebody pointed out recently, like Jordan Peterson points things out, like in Pinocchio and A Lion King. Somebody else pointed out some stuff in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and it could be somebody you know. Pointed out some stuff in The Hunchback of Notre Dame that is in attunement with the logos. There's all kinds of parallels that you find when you know what to look for. And then whether you're hearing somebody speak, like in this group or elsewhere, or whether you're reading a Gnostic gospel that isn't scripture, you can discern signal and noise regardless of what the source is. And when your receiver is tuned in and you know what the divine numinous sounds like, what it feels like to be in attunement with it, you can start to sense where it is and where it isn't, regardless of where it's coming from. And then all the information signals around you, you start to hear and see them differently, and you start to perceive like logos and anti-logos messages in all directions. If so be that ye have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus. So the way to flow with the logos is there. Anyway, I will stop talking about this and see if there's any comments that you have, such Ruth.
I've spent a lot of time in the last few days looking at the whole Jew versus Gentile, looking through John and Matthew, and I sent you that article, Kevin. But if I read verses 17 to 21, in the opposite way that Paul is doing it, as if he, instead of Gentiles, if I put in the idea of Judaism, it's almost like the way it was in the Jewish world. So don't walk as the Jews walked in the vanity of their mind, because the law and this and that. Their understanding was dark and being alienated and so forth, giving themselves unto whatever. And then it says in 21, if so be that ye have heard him and have been taught by him, as the truth is in Jesus, just made me think about John, where if you know the Father, you will know me. It just almost seems the opposite of what was being said in the Gospels to the Gentiles now.
That's an amazing insight. I want to tell you guys something. I haven't done this yet. Right over to my right, I have these props that I bought, and the props involve school glue and glitter. And I haven't been able to figure this out yet, but basically what I want to do is I want to use the school glue and write the word Jesus. And then I want to use the glitter and write the word Jehovah over it in glitter, right? And then film, when you blow off the glitter, I'm going to do that in my wife's office. When you blow off the glitter, what's remaining is Jesus. And the inspiration for this illustration came from the book of John. When you read the book of John, it's like Jesus has been it's like Jehovah has been, of the Old Testament, the law, all this stuff has been fecund with Jesus the whole time. And if you had been following Jehovah, when the glitter blows away, you would recognize this as Jehovah too. And the reason you don't hear my voice, Book of John, is because you haven't been following Jehovah in the first place, even though you claim to have been. They're taking the Lord's name in vain. So it's like the followership of Jesus was embedded, is nested in, like a Russian nesting doll, was nested in the following of Jehovah the whole time. And those who were doing it in good faith would recognize Jehovah manifest in the flesh. And those who don't recognize Jehovah when he's manifest in the flesh, they were not in fact following Jehovah in the first place. Something like that.
I and the Father are one.
Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like there's convergence there, Ruth, with what you just said with what I've been feeling from the Book of John.
Okay, and read that article I sent you. It's excellent. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I do have the email, and I appreciate you sending that to me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to that soon.
So I kind of feel like there's these different, within the past 20 minutes, there's been like these different little nuggets that Kevin and Ruth just brought out that are just like, so it's like setting up for like somebody to just hit a slam dunk or something like that, like an alley-oop. So if I do this right, it should feel that way. So one of the things Kevin said that I want to draw off of was that when Paul's writing, it seems like he's writing about an idea over an idea in an idea about an idea, and it almost like like it never closes itself in a holistic way, but it keeps sprouting out new ideas that he's circling around. And I want to take that opportunity to go to look at verse 20, but ye have not so learned of Christ, and use that verse to be a little bit more specific and use that verse in context to reference to things he already told them about Christ, about being in Christ, and that being in Jesus, because it says in verse 21, as the truth is in Jesus, and use that to use all of that information and inject it into verse 20, into the meaning of what he's talking about in verse 20. And where Ruth's comments kind of come into this so nicely is that at the end of chapter 2 and chapter 3, Paul just finished basically talking about the differences between the Jews and the Gentiles, that Christ, as you know, so you have not so learned of Christ, but what you have learned about Christ is that he has slain the enmity between these two types of people and created in one man, a new man. And he's going to talk about that new man in the next couple verses, in verse 24, actually. So I think Ruth's comments are they're so awesome. And so I did want to take the opportunity to use verse 20 to look back at chapter 3, verse 10, because I think that, Kevin, when you had said earlier that Paul, when he's writing, he's kind of branching off ideas and creating this illustration of like a tree. Like there's this big trunk which is the main idea, and then there's all these branches, and then a branch off of a branch off of a branch. And so it can be hard to talk about what Paul is getting at sometimes, because it's so deep, it's so deeply layered. And so we can be
like the movie Inception.
Yes,
you have a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream, and they're all right. You don't understand one dream unless you understand that it's contextualized for a
Right.
purpose in the parent dream.
Right. So what I want to do is so it can kind of feel sometimes in FSI when we're circling around specifically Ephesians 4 that we're in like the first dream or something like that. And we
Yeah.
go into that dream and then we go down, further and further. So I just want to take this opportunity to reverse back and go up a step, just to sort of look at the layer that might be surrounding if the things that are relevant to us in Ephesians 4. And it's going to turn out that one of the things that is surrounding the dream that's above the dream that we're usually springboarding in is going to be something to do with the Jews and the Gentiles, and specifically that in chapter 3 verse 10, he kind of gives, again, this is just a tree branch, it's not the main idea, but it's a principled idea where he says that the whole reason that this whole revelation about Jews and Gentiles coming into Christ or being given access by grace through faith into Christ, one of those reasons is to the intent that now unto the principalities and powers in heavenly places might be known by the church, which is us, the assembly of God, the manifold wisdom of God. And so one of the things that's what I'm trying to get at is one of the ideas that's surrounding the things that we're looking at in Ephesians 4 is that it has something to do with the unfolding to the church of the manifold wisdom of God. So wisdom is something that is an orienting item within all of the events going on in Ephesians 4, if that makes any sense. I'm done.
Say that last couple of sentences again.
So what I'm trying to do is use verse 20 in Ephesians 4 to reverse Paul's thoughts to say, hey, you haven't, these are the things you've learned about Christ. So back up to the things I told you about Christ, like just a couple, paragraphs ago or whatever. And one of those things is that the positioning of Jews and Gentiles and the relations between them is changed in Christ. Their individual relations to God is changed in Christ. And
right.
All of this is intended. It's to the intention that the principalities and powers in heavenly places might be known by the church, by this new thing, the manifold wisdom of God. So the manifold wisdom of God takes this like North Star kind of position in all of the things that he's going to say henceforth. So now you get to Ephesians chapter 4, and it's like all of this great stuff about a new broadcast modality, a new modality of individual being and agency in the world, and the happening of all this is emanating and unfolding the manifold wisdom of God. So the wisdom of God is playing itself out from, chapter 3, verse 10 down.
So the visual that's popping in my head as you're saying that, and it makes perfect sense, is like being in Christ. Say the wisdom of God is already surrounding you. It's almost like right now, even though we can't see it, there's all kinds of radio and TV waves floating by our head. We just can't see them. And the wisdom of God, in the way God operates, don't think of something static, but something like the motion of God and being able to sense it and be in attunement with it. It's already around us. We just can't see it because we're foregrounding all the wrong things. And being in Christ is like putting on the glasses in the movie Free Guy, and if you haven't seen the movie Free Guy yet, it's a relatively new movie. The guy is a video game character, but he doesn't know he is. And when he puts on the glasses, then he basically sees like augmented reality all the video game features are suddenly available to him and he didn't know they were there before. But I would also say that in this instance, especially when you consider the carnal Christians of 1 Corinthians, maybe these glasses, take anywhere from several months to a couple of years to put on, if that makes sense, or to adjust to. Maybe you put them on and at first you're not sure what you're seeing, but and then as you adjust to them, you start to see all the things that have been there the whole time, but you just couldn't see them without looking through the lenses of having being in Christ. Does that make sense? And so then he goes on through Ephesians to kind of explain that.
Right. So all I'm trying to say in an insanely prolonged way is that from chapter 3 verse 10 down, which is the chapter 3 verse 10 is kind of the revelation of, hey, this whole thing between Jews and Gentiles, and like your perspective as a Gentile, that you need to be reminded that by grace you are saved through faith, and that the Jews are self-righteous and they have stumbling blocks and things like that, and you're foreign to the promises of God and self-righteousness and all that stuff, but you have to remember this stuff. All of this is going to be for the intention of the manifold wisdom of God. Now let me show you from chapter 3 verse 10 down how this manifold wisdom unfolds itself and reveals itself to you who are in Jesus.
So when you see a word like intent, that's a huge biblical interpretation word. Because, we talked in biblical interpretation, we talk about this central idea of the text, in which boils down to, why is this guy writing? Why is this person saying these things? And when you have a very clear passage like this, and I've previously thought that Paul wasn't good at, like, John will come out and say, I'm writing unto you because of this. My little children, I write unto you because da 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 da. Gives you the reasons. In John chapter 20, but these things I write unto you so that you may believe that Jesus is the Son of God. He gives you very clear purpose verses for why he's writing in it. I've thought in the past that Paul wasn't very good at doing that, but in cases like this, he is showing, he uses this word intent here, and that should be a huge red flag. Like, whoa, what am I looking at here? I'm looking at a huge fulcrum on a lever around which all of this information pivots. So if I can get this right, this intent, if I can get this intent right, I'll recognize that everything else that has been said and everything else that is about to be said rotates around this as the leverage. This is the intent around which all this information rotates. And then that helps contextualize it, which is if you're trying to understand the book of Ephesians, that word intent is a gift. It's a call out gift to let you know what to hone in on and what to foreground. And then you can see all the other information as like spokes which tie back to that intent.
Yeah, that's such a great way of summarizing. I feel really, really good about how you just re-articulated what I was trying to get at. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's also really important for like what Ruth said to understand that what Ruth was getting at in terms of the perspectives of a Jew and a Gentile within the context of Ephesians is part of the unfolding of this intended thing in verse 10. It's important to see that, which is why when she said it, I was like jumping.
There's been a lot of chat about Jew-Gentile stuff so far. So for the sake of context, I'm going to tie one of those spokes back in. Paul is writing to Gentiles. Now, what I've just went back in chapter 2, and he's talking about them before they got saved, before they were in Christ, if you will. And he says, wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision. In other words, circumcision is an epithet for the Jews, and then uncircumcision is everybody else, Gentiles, in the flesh made by hands. That at that time you were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Great verse to destroy the Calvinist slant of Ephesians 1:4, by the way. But now in Christ, very different transition here. Is that you've gone from not having glasses on to put them on. Ye who sometimes were far off were made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make himself of twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached to you peace which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. So to Jews and to Gentiles, they both get the message. And breaking down that middle wall of partition, it's almost like those glasses to see reality were there the whole time. But when you've got keeping the law of Moses and circumcision blocking you from putting on those glasses, and now that's taken out of the way. Wow. So just to tie that in, I wanted to go back and look at that, because he goes right back and talks about that Jew-Gentile dynamic there. All right, other comments on 20 and 21 from chapter, no, where were we? Chapter 4, yeah. 20 and 21 from chapter 4. Hope that isn't making you dizzy seeing all that scrolling. All right, I don't see anybody popping up. I don't think I see anybody raising their hands. We're trying to look for that lately, by the way. All right, so I'm going to go on and look at verse 22. And I don't have a note for this one. That ye put off concerning the former conversation the old man, and a conversation is a way of operating, which is corrupt according to deceitful lusts. Now, if you think of deceitful lusts, typically the first, probably 2 decades, or how long have I been Christian reading the Bible? Since I was a wee lad. Up until recently, when I would see deceitful lusts, I would think of things like indulging in food and alcohol and immorality and things like that. When I see this now, deceitful lusts, I'm reminded of the goal of cognitive science, which is to stop self-deception. And deception is caused by foregrounding the wrong things, making salient the wrong things, thinking the wrong things are relevant because your aim is off, and lusting after certainty, which when you think you get it is just an illusion anyway. So your lust and craving for certainty causes you to buy into narratives that purport to provide it and make you feel secure in your certainty, but in fact are not. And as a result, you are believing in something that is not true, which means you are deceived. And so it's better to acknowledge the uncertainty in which you are existing rather than be deceived into thinking you can have certainty that you can't. And so deceitful lusts, this paradigm. And so then be renewed in the spirit of your mind ties right into Romans chapter 12, in the spirit of your mind, in the directionality of your mind. Be Romans 12:2, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So you're putting off an old way for a new way, which means you're going to foreground different things. You're going to make relevant different things. And this being deceived, it ties, if you're thinking about what is salient and what is relevant, you can't know what is relevant unless you are oriented towards something, right? And y'all ever Any of y'all ever lose something and you go looking for it through your house, and say you lose a pair of sunglasses, right? And you go looking for it through your house, and then finally you find them. And then the next day you lose something else, like your car keys or something. And you saw them when you were looking for your sunglasses, but they weren't salient to you at the time because that wasn't the thing you were looking for. But then you don't remember where they are. So now it's relevant. You saw it before, but it wasn't relevant to you at that time. And that's what relevance realization, that's the problem of relevance realization of all the things that we are exposed to. It is difficult. And that's one of the problems with AI, getting AI to replicate humanity. Is one of the difficult things is, how does something learn what is relevant? And you can't know what is relevant unless you are oriented towards something, because things are only relevant in respect toward a goal. Like, yeah, you probably find food and water relevant because you're trying to not die, right? And so whatever it is you're trying to do, that is what shapes that which is relevant to you. And so those are deceitful lusts. Deceitful lusts are things that cause things to stand out that are not relevant. And I want to make one more comment, and then I'll stop for comments from you. But what I will say is this: when you are subjecting yourself to a paradigm like Calvinism or something like that, it reshapes your salience landscape, and it causes you to foreground things as relevant to this that are not relevant to this, that are not relevant to a proper aim, a properly oriented, spirit motivated movement in life. They're not relevant to that, but they are relevant to the paradigm. That's why ideologues are constantly spinning their wheels with debates back and forth and mounting up a whole bunch of technical debt in the building up of the systematic theology and systematically disambiguating it, while nobody's being transformed in the meantime. They got the wrong things have been made relevant to them by the paradigm. Deceitful lusts. You lust after certainty. The paradigm is there to provide it for you. Now you cannot foreground the proper things because you're disoriented. All right, stopping. Comments from y'all. I knew this was coming.
Yeah, I got some stuff. I got some stuff, but I'm talking too much. So if somebody has got something, please just cut me off. Yeah. Oh, okay. So that verse 22, that you put off the concerning the former conversation, the old man, that's been a massive verse for me for a number of years now. So it has a lot of different baggage, not necessarily bad baggage, but to try and condense it in my mind and articulate something for you guys that is relevant to our conversation here. How I understand this verse is very different depending on circumstances. But I see, one of the ways I see this verse is that you put off concerning the former conversation, the old man. I see that as Paul instructing these people that in order to participate in this new edification model and appropriate maximum agency, which is going to be the putting on, the appropriation of the new man, Christ, which he talked about in chapter 2, the new man, it's going to have to do with not playing game A conversations. Right. So not entering yourself into rivalrous dynamics, rivalrous conversations with yourself, with other people. And this is a one-way street for corruption and cognitive dissonance, because what you're, like Kevin just beautifully articulated, thinking in terms of the former conversation, the old man is looking at the world in terms of good and evil in dichotomous ways. So no matter what the situation is, you're going to bunker down into your ideological fortifications, call them righteous, call everything that's outside of it
behind all those flow charts of answers and
Yes.
responses and all those
Right.
formulas, and you're going to think you're moral for doing so.
Right. I really do think that the old man is a mental way of thinking. It's he is a cognitive agent who only thinks in dichotomies. It only thinks in seeing things as under the law. He's still under the law from like a Romans kind of a perspective, where he just sees things as good versus evil. He has no ability to appropriate the new man who is created in righteousness and true holiness, and sees things in terms of wisdom. Like, what's the situation here that I need to appropriate all of.
So you stop seeing things as good and evil, and you start seeing things as relevant or irrelevant with respect to whatever your goal toward your mark is.
Which is why the holiness, the righteousness and true holiness is important, because holiness is the things that are sacred, right? So the things that are rightly sacred is what orients your mind, regardless of the old man's conversation, which says, well, that thing's evil and that thing's wrong and this thing's right, all of that, those false dichotomies. So it's the holiness here that orients the agency of the new man. So
I have a thought, and I'm having a difficult time having it coalesce into words. This concept of getting away from the black and white thinking, and things are either relevant or irrelevant toward whatever the goal is.
Yep.
Is, I can't stress how important that is. And what I would suggest, and I hinted at this yesterday when I was talking about Colossians, but what I would suggest for everyone to think about is this. If you were to make up a list of all the vices, of all the things that you shouldn't do, because Paul has his list of vices and virtues, right? You do all these things, you won't enter the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit are these great things, right? There's these dichotomous list of vices and virtues. I would suggest, and I want you to think about this before you have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm saying this to everybody, is that if you are walking in true holiness, there could come a time when, because of the aim that is required for any situation demands it, that something from the vices list could become relevant toward a goal. And Paul says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. It's not about whether or not things are lawful. It's about whether or not they are expedient toward a sacredly oriented goal, toward that mark, toward what you're pressing. And there is no list of do's and don'ts that account for everybody's mark. And so when Paul lists these good and bad things, they're kind of like heuristic things that we can accumulate to kind of get an idea. And it's, if you could reduce it, it's more like aimlessness and aiming. All these other things. And one of the things I'm going to bring up when we're talking about Colossians in that series, in the transformation-oriented edification, is that this touch not, taste not, handle not, you can guide your life by bouncing off all the things you shouldn't do, but not have an aim. Or you can guide your life by, what was the next thing? Colossians 3:8. And I hate to steal the thunder of of that series limbically hijack things like anger, wrath, malice, and blasphemy. You know, so you don't want to have this egocentric approach to these kinds of things. You don't want to just touch not, taste not, handle not. And then also you don't want to, like lasciviousness and uncleanness, you don't want to just be driven by your hypothalamic desires to fulfill yourself for pleasure and survival either. Like everybody needs to drink water and eat food and be intimate with somebody. You can't just be driven by those things. You need to have some kind of aim that helps you put together the right combination of all these things so that you can get to that aim, not just loosely, aimlessly do and not do all these things. So what you're doing and not doing is all with respect to what you're aiming at. And the example that I used with my wife yesterday, I play guitar. My wife does not play guitar. And so I was like, this touch not, taste not, handle not stuff, I could tell her all day how, there we go, I got a guitar pick right here. I could tell her all day how not to hold a guitar pick, right? And believe it or not, she follows that rule every day of her life. She never holds a guitar pick wrong. You see? But she also doesn't play guitar. So she's not playing any better or any faster or with more accuracy, but she's never holding her guitar pick wrong. So having this touch not, taste not, handle not approach does not necessarily make anybody any better at any particular goal, orientation or goal. I hope y'all follow me on that. So it takes a lot of wisdom, and it's, you know, if I were to get specific on this stuff, you'd be like, it'd be all kinds of legalistic people out there saying, "Oh, you're just trying to justify your sin." That's not what's trying to go on here at all. Arnold has his hand up. Arnold.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. I wanted to talk about what you mentioned about AI, the fact that doing this through the internet and doing it on Zoom is so difficult to form a cohesive family. I think that's what, like, you mentioned that a little earlier. You talked about AI. How do we do this? I mean, I had to come on. I'm at work, and I had to turn the camera off because I am working. But I just had to jump in and participate tonight. I don't know, my spirit was itching, and I just had to say something about, you mentioned, again, before you mentioned, not tonight, but other times, like, how do we meet together? You know, that for me, it seems that meeting together physically, you know, creating the body of Christ in person is key for this to move forward. I mean, doing it on Zoom is a great, I don't know, it's a start, I suppose. I mean, it is.
Yeah, we got an active fundraiser right now, and when we raise enough money, we're gonna move everyone to Baton Rouge.
Okay, I'll stop.
That's phase 2 of FSI. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, like something like an organic church, or a something where we, I don't know how to explain it. It's just, it needs to be like you were saying earlier. It has to be. It's not just a talking head. We have to somehow have a physical experience with the transcendent. How do we do that in the internet?
So,
I mean,
it's difficult. So it's not like this medium is chosen because it's optimal. It's basically a lack of options. But it would be ideal. Imagine you're with a group of people and you're all edifying each other, and it's not just that you meet and exchange information every once in a while, but maybe you also, you know, play soccer or board games or volleyball or play music. You know, there's other ways of interaction with these people, and so you're constantly connected and edified by the wisdom that you can see exhibited in their life on a day-to-day basis, rather than just things they say when they show up to a meeting like this. I agree that would be ideal. Somebody said, are there good hospitals in Baton Rouge? I may need to look into this. There are some really good ones. There's one bad one. It's called Our Lady of the Lake, and there is a nickname that they call the Lady of the Lake, which I cannot repeat online, at least not on this channel. But y'all can Google that. But yeah, there's some good hospitals here. Some real good ones.
Just to follow up on that a little bit too, like one of the things that is a step in terms of addressing Arnold's concerns there, which are concerns basically of everybody that participates, is it does seem like the TOE, what the TOE series is just oriented towards is actually diving into a particular information database via, i.e., the Bible and or a Zoom dialogue, and then coming out of that interaction transformed and renewed in the spirit of your mind in some way. So, that's a step in the right direction in terms of, being able to dive into like an information ecology and then emerge out of it as something different, which again is infinitely more rich when your body is, connected in some way to the environment. But I think that series is definitely a step in the right direction.
Let me unmute myself. It's interesting that you say when your body is connected to that environment. I would, when you think of cognition, one of the main things of 4E cognition is embodiment, and then extended cognition, embedded, enacted, all this kind of stuff. It requires interaction with, like, physical, local interaction with you and other people in the same environment. So yeah, I think we have at least one person who's going to look into moving to Baton Rouge. So we're going to start up. We're going to start something up here pretty soon. We're gonna get something going here. That'll be interesting. Any other comments, thoughts so far? Yes, Jamie. You're on mute, I think.
Hi, hey guys.
Yeah.
Just a few observation questions that I have concerning verse 22 through 24. I'm a little weak on my grammar, so you'll have to excuse my ignorance there, but I see this as that you put off concerning the former conversation, the old man, which is corrupt according to the deceitful lust, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, and that you put on. So is the putting off and the putting on, is that an active verb or a passive verb, or is this something that is a result of verse 21, as the truth is in Jesus, as after we learn Jesus? Is this something active verb we do, putting off, or is it passive? Or do we go on autopilot when we learn more of Jesus, we become closer to him? Does some of this stuff come automatically, or is this, I guess, is active or passive? That's my question, really. It's just something I've been observing. And if it's an active verb, putting off, how would you do that? What would that look like? Then put on the new man. So
The Greek that I'm looking at right now in Duo is a verb aorist middle infinitive verb. And an aorist verb is difficult sometimes to translate into English, especially modern English. That's where the King's English helps out a little bit. But typically aorist verbs are seen as also potentially ongoing, like not just a single past tense thing, but an ongoing thing. And where's the put off?
verse 22, put off.
Yeah. So
And
verse
24 is
22.
putting on. Yep.
The E. Oh yeah. put aside and get rid of. I'm going to see if you guys can see this. I don't know if you can see these little pop-ups. Can y'all see that little pop-up? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that Greek word, apotithemai, all right, is it's a verb aorist middle infinitive, right? One thing I love about technology is that you can check somebody on their Greek in like 3 clicks. Or you can go get an $80,000 education and brag about it to everybody. This one is also aorist. So it kind of reminds me of Alfred North Whitehead's process theology, where there's a constant, imagine reality flowing through you. And you know those card games where you draw cards and you discard cards? You're constantly discarding things in the flow of reality. You're constantly discarding things that you don't need with respect to the goal that you're aiming for. And you're constantly drawing cards that are more relevant toward the thing that you're aiming for. You're putting on and taking off. It in the language that, well, like we've been talking about, it's like a shift in the salience landscape where that which is relevant has shifted to something else. So shift what is relevant to you and start taking on those things, start foregrounding those things. And I would say, I think there's a pretty good argument that putting off and putting on would be an ongoing way of living constantly, rather than some kind of one-time event.
Yeah. Could I when Jamie asked that question, I wanted to ask him a clarifying question, because when you asked it, Jamie, you were kind of breaking how I see these 2 verses or 3 verses. And the follow-up question I was going to ask you was like, so are you asking, is this like sort of like a process thing? Because now that's kind of what I heard you asking. It kind of like, it really opens up how I see the central idea that Paul might be getting at, something just in terms of these 3 verses connected together. So yeah, that's really awesome, because definitely in my mind, the way I understand these 3 verses would it be like they're specific instances in which you are to do this as a behavior in your daily operation. But so your question was able to break that frame for me and allow me to look at this as maybe more of a flow state, process oriented thing that Paul is encouraging you towards or instructing you towards. So that was awesome.
That's exactly what I was trying to get at. Thank you for articulate as well, because you always hear it preached, these verses. Well, if you want to take off your put on a clean shirt, take off your dirty shirt,
Right.
It almost seems static,
Yeah,
not dynamic.
Perfect word.
I'm seeing now as more dynamic. Once after you're saved, it's time to get to growing. But as we learn of Jesus, this is going on autopilot. Is way I'm seeing it now. But anyway, you're right, Nick.
That's excellently articulated, Jamie.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, praise God. That's why I'm asking about the active verb and passive verb. That's what I see right now. But I just think we're on autopilot, man. We just keep growing and we're kicking off old things and we're moving.
It kind of reminds me of, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. The older 2 are, the oldest one's out of the house, and the 17-year-old's basically out of the house by now. But the 12-year-old and 9-year-old, I had to have a conversation with them recently where I said the phrase, y'all need to start taking a bath without being told. Well, that does not mean for them to go take a bath right now, but it means on an ongoing basis, they need to have as a regular practice the act of taking a bath without having to be prompted by somebody else. that sort of thing, to where you say things in a way that the intent is for there to be an ongoing practice of the thing, not just a one-time immediate, that kind of stuff. What, Ruth, yeah.
Well, no, this is not to be negative, but a girlfriend commented to me last week and she said, Ruth, I'm just getting a little tired of these church services that are just motivational messages. And it just sort of tied into what Jamie was saying. It's put off, put on, turn off the social media, get in the Bible, do this, do that.
Yep.
And really it becomes motivational message Sundays.
MMS. I like that. Motivational Message Sunday. Melm's Motivational Message Sunday.
Bingo.
3MS. Or M3S. Yeah, 3MS. You just coined a new term. We're going to start avoiding 3MSs. We're going to sell coffee mugs that have 3MS with a little red circle with a line through it over it. And people will have to ask you what that means.
So this reminds me of there's this famous so when I was in college, I went to school in Boston, and there's this big music school called Berklee School of Music there. So I actually
That's
roomed
where
with
Dream Theater went, by the way.
Yes. John yeah. So
John Petrucci and Kim Thiel from Soundgarden were actually roommates.
Right.
And Kim Thiel complained that John wasn't social enough. Well, John went on to be arguably the best guitar player in the world because he was always practicing.
So I ended up living in an apartment with a kid who was going to Berklee School of Music. So he opened me up to Dream Theater and that whole thing. But there's this famous bassist named Victor Wooten who came to campus, and my roommate was like freaking out about going to see him. And I went to go see him, and one of the things that he was like advocating was that people stop going to music lessons. Like Ruth was just saying, her girlfriend was like, I'm tired of going to church and getting these like feel good messages. And then Jamie's saying like, stop telling me to have these single instances of this is when I need to do the right behavior. And Victor Wooten was like, stop going to music lessons. Find a group of jazz players. I don't care if you've never played an instrument before. Get an instrument and sit inside of their jazz session. And he's like, in an ideal world, he was trying to make the argument that you could develop the world's greatest musician if you had them like eternally just sit inside of a jazz session and have an instrument, and that they would eventually, by process of time and the way that your brain is able to just develop pattern recognition and embody the patterns that you're discerning in the world, that you would just learn music. Like you would be like some insane jazz player. And everybody's looking at him like, what are you talking about? We've spent thousands and tens of thousands of dollars to have somebody show us and give us exercises and technical, little exercises to learn how to play guitar. And he's like, no, throw that all out the window. You'll learn to be the best jazz player if you just sit with a bunch of people and play jazz.
Yeah, and listen to what they say about it at the same time. There's like a cognitive cultural grammar that goes with it. And when you hear how people talk about it, it kind of opens doors for where you can explore as well in any domain. I'm like, wow, how did you know that?
So if the analogy follows, then the way to be a better, or to be able to have the capacity or agency to follow Christ or be more like Christ or conform to the image of Christ, is to immerse yourself into a bunch of people who are playing to that tune, who are pressing towards that mark, who aren't just like, okay, just kind of come to our church. We have a systematic way of how you're going to learn the Bible. You're going to start with the Gospel of John, and then we're going to take you to Romans, and we're going to teach you what that means. And it's like, well, why don't we just throw you into, so I don't know. Maybe
So this is a great analogy. If I could share a story real quick, when I went to two colleges. One was the University of Mobile, Marion Military Institute, and then the University of Mobile after that. Well, Marion Military Institute, when I went there, I was, I had just graduated high school, and I got a scholarship to play the bass while there. I had to audition in music, got a scholarship to play the bass. So I played the bass for 2 years on scholarship there. So I was, I thought I was all right. At the University of Mobile, I auditioned to play for this group called Vision. And I got past the audition phase, and I was trying to be a singer, but I played the piano to sing a song, which was a Dream Theater song, by the way. And they wanted me to come record with them. And I went to high school, and I don't want to name drop on this channel, but I went to high school with Jeremy Redmond, who's the guitar player for Big Daddy Weave. And he was associated. We also went to college, University of Mobile together. And so he was with this group. And I went to record with these guys, and I did not have my 4-string bass. And they started the recording, handed me a 6-string bass and said, go. It did not work out well because I'd never played a 6-string bass before. But we had some fun that night. Spent about 2 hours there, that kind of thing. And hearing these guys talk, like you said, Nick, hearing these guys talk who were expert musicians, you could tell they were just immersed in it. I learned more just being around that and absorbing what they were saying and what they were doing and trying to replicate it than any kind of lesson that you could have. And yeah, we used to, all through high school too, a bunch of us used to get together, and everybody's constantly learning from each other and growing off each other. So yeah, that's a great analogy. Janie, are you going to say something else? I thought you gave a little wave.
I had a little story
Yeah, Joe.
related to what you were saying. I was trying to play a difficult music piece one time, and I don't think I had ever heard it played before, but I was just, had the music. And so I spent hours, days, weeks practicing it. And then I actually listened to a recording of it. And after listening and hearing it, I listening to it one time probably improved my performance of it more than hours and hours of practice.
Right. Yep. I just did that today with a piece that I'm working on. That's exactly right. Just listening to it. That's right.
It's kind of crazy too. It's not, and then you can add the layer of actually observing somebody play the song. And it's like how they actually move their body. So there's like this added layer of being able to, know the musical notations and the musical progression on a music sheet. And then there's the ability to, now I can hear it and sort of maybe almost form shapes and colors and movements, dynamic movements in my mind, but then to watch somebody try and embody it while they're playing the instrument is like, a whole nother thing.
So we have some musicians in this group. This could be exciting.
I saw Roberta nodding her head, and I'm curious.
Any other musicians in the group besides Joe and Nick and me?
Me, but I would say that I'm going to learn an instrument soon, but for the last 6 years, being as though I drive trucks, I've been in the truck just listening to music over the last 5 decades.
Yeah.
And I kind of been developing into I would say if you were at a label, I'd be like the A&R. And so I've been developing my ear to listen and calibrate my senses to really understand the music and its impact on people. Because I listen to a lot of James Brown and stuff like that. And those rhythms really kind of inspired a lot of people, a lot of musicians. So I've been really into that. So
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, there's a technical ear for it, and then there's also you can detect the logos and music as well. That's for sure. Somebody said, "Hey, y'all should do worship tonight." So I thought about starting whenever we go live. I thought about starting off the first few minutes with a little music, like a little music piece, maybe just like playing something that I like, something like that. Oh, and what I think would be kind of cool is some of y'all who do music, play something that you like, send it to me, and I'll combine something with it, and we can have a remote combined session. I did that with a buddy of mine just this like about a week ago. I made this song. I heard a piano song. I recreated it on guitar with 3 guitars. He got a hold of it. My buddy here got a hold of it, and he added some drums and some electric guitar to it and sent it back to me. Then I added some lead guitar to that and sent it back to him. So that'd be kind of funny. It'd be kind of fun to do something like that. I want to start incorporating something like that, some kind of art into what we're doing here on Beyond the Fundamentals and FSI. And it would be cool if we could do something collaborative. And speaking of worship, that's pretty cool. There are some okay Christian songs that we could do. I was thinking about doing something with a Revelation song too. All right. We can look at, did we look at verse 24 yet? Did we specifically look at that, or did it just get mentioned? That you put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. I wonder if that created is aorist or not, or as if I even know what I'm talking about. To create, yeah, that one is too. Verb aorist, passive participle, accusative, masculine, singular, which is created in righteousness and true holiness. So I would also see that the new man as being this ongoing thing which is constantly being created. Think of the reality. Think of the capacity of mankind to alter the landscape in which we live. You see? So the reality in which we live it's almost like to a small degree. When you think of it in a large scale, like galaxies and the solar system and all that, Earth still is kind of just doing its thing. But to a certain degree, mankind is, as far as the surface of the earth is concerned, we're kind of like co-creators with God. We can really shift this environment to be very different than how we found it. And we can shift it to be very adaptive to certain kinds of behaviors and very maladaptive to other kinds of behaviors. We can make anything from prisons to baseball stadiums to a hadron collider. I mean, we can really make some stuff. We really shift things. And there's this ongoing, and so in your own life, in your own world, if you will, think about the kind of agency that you can have to create an environment around you which affords you more agency to do more, because that's what mankind does. We want to do something, so we create an environment in which we can do it. We build buildings, we build office buildings, we build airplanes, we build ships. We want to be able to do something. I want to be able to get goods from here to there. So we build this whole transportation system of trains and ships and planes and whatnot and trucks to make it happen. And we shift the environment to make this thing that we want to happen. But it first has to be envisioned. Here's what I want to do. What would need to be in place in order for that to be a thing? And then you start working to get that thing in place so that it becomes a thing.
So I have this image in my mind in regard to this particular verse that is really profound to me. Where did it go? Oh, yeah. So that you put on the new man, which is like, right, ultimate agency. And so now try this out, which after God, which is like the best thing ever, the highest value, is created in righteousness and true holiness. So I'm going to substitute an analogy. So which after God, or like, so put on like the new awesome music player or artist, which after like the greatest form of music or greatest harmony, God is created, like it emanates out in a music studio, righteousness and high skill level, true holiness or something. So it's like this, it's like instructions on appropriate this agency in the world, and this is how it's created. This is how you create this pattern of action after God, which is the highest value. Like, is anybody seeing that?
So when it says after God, it's like that's the value for which we are aiming and modeling things after. And then it's also helpful if you see God not as a static being, but as a dynamic, moving entity.
Right. So which after God.
So you want to mimic that kind of motion and movement.
Right. And the way to do it is in the instructions. This path, this way, this conversation is created and emanates in righteousness and true holiness. So like if you're in a certain analogy, if God is like the highest value, the thing you're after is playing the best song, right? Put on the new man, and it's created in righteousness, put in something, I don't know, in a music studio, in true holiness, having a high, or the exercising of high skill level with the instrument or something. And I don't know if that's making sense, but.
Well, I think the words righteousness and holiness have bad branding for Christians. They're going to think of somebody being super legalistic and rule following, typical kind of fundamentalist Christianity. Anybody from someone in a monastery to Mother Teresa to Jack Hyles. I mean, who knows what people think when they think of holy and righteous. But when you think of those words or the word virtuous, I want people to start to think of like that which is dynamic, like moving, not stagnant, and in attunement with that which is real. So if you were to use a music analogy, it would be like somebody who is able to improvise and follow the flow of the song and stay with the chord progression.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
So I'm a huge skateboarding fan. Huge.
Yeah.
And so when I think of righteousness, I don't have a Christian notion of it. When I think of righteousness,
which is helpful.
I think of somebody landing this gnarly, awesome trick and everybody going, that was righteous, dude. And so that's what I think of. So,
well, that is it's funny that you say that, because I just watched like one of those TikTok videos popped up on my Facebook feed, and it was a guy doing a skateboard trick on a really high ramp. And it was an amazing degree of skill and sovereignty and control that he pulled this off. I mean, it's amazing. I would be scared to death to try something like this. It went really high up in the air on both, two little hops. So it is an amazing degree of attunement with the arena, like you're in attune with the gravity, with the flow, with the centrifugal forces, with the mastery of your body, with the physics against all those things. It's so that you can move with them and flow with them. Whereas if you were to put me on that skateboard, you would then be putting me in an ambulance. But he can avoid that because he has attunement with the physics and the arena, whereas I don't.
He has alignment with it, which is why righteousness and justification are similar.
He sees the shape of the flow and he can move with it. He knows where it's going and what to do to be at the right place at the right time to not die.
That's righteousness.
Yes. Jamie, did you throw your hand up for a second?
Yes, I sure did. When Nick was describing what he was seeing in verse 24, he's using music and whatnot. what came to my mind, I used to be in the band also playing the trumpet in an orchestra, and we'd have
It's going
to
to start
follow.
sounding like Chicago if we're bringing it.
We had to follow the conductor. So I see God here as the conductor. We have to go by his flow on his command, and he conducts the flow, and we are to join the conductor in this piece of music to make this magnificent piece. And that's what I see here. That's what I saw when Nick was describing his thoughts on that verse. And I can see a symphony in God, that he's the conductor.
I need to think about that one, Jamie.
Okay. That's
I mean,
just something.
So I don't
You know
know.
what I mean?
The conductor. So jazz, there's a little bit of improvisation. Conductor and orchestra is so scripted, and it's almost broadcast model. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I wonder if conductor and orchestra is more like Ephesians 4:11 and 12. And
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
I could also see that in jazz, the conductor is the logos. The conductor is
Right.
but in a symphony,
jazz, it can be, there is a unity there.
yes,
But it's not any individual entity who's controlling it. There is a unity.
You have to be in attunement with something that's elusive as the conductor.
Yes.
Where in a symphony, I could imagine that the logos is taking the creative principle is conducting the flow of things in the embodiment of a person.
That's right.
But allowing you the freedom within your personality and your own creativity as that jazz player. And if I have that ability, I'm growing to be like that jazz leader, skateboard star, I don't need motivational messages then, because I'm so in line.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
A jazz
Well
leader,
said.
skateboard star. This is like the greatest person in the world to me.
And the conductor can put in some improvisation to a certain extent. Like he can set the tempo, and he can, tell him to get a little softer, play a little louder.
Yeah, you can guide the dynamics. Yeah.
Where I guess the sheet music everybody's following could be more the script. I guess there's not an exact one-to-one either way, but
right.
Yeah.
Analogies break down at some point. It's kind of funny that the synchronicity of this, that we're talking about this in skateboarding. And then also earlier today, I happened upon a video of B.B. King with Slash playing The Thrill Is Gone. And there's a bunch of different musicians taking turns singing and then also taking turns playing the guitar. So they are doing the song, and the song has some recognizability to it and some kind of like predetermined course that it has to follow, but very loosely. There's also a lot of room for improvisation and expression when it comes to how the people sing or exactly what the solo guitarists play. It's pretty amazing. Arnold has his hand up, and we got to start getting ready to wrap up here too.
Thank you. I wanted to share that there's a theologian, I don't want to drop any names. He has been teaching for years. He talks about the gospel according to jazz. He's from Tennessee, I think. Yeah, and so he has I've taken some courses with him. That was 20 years ago. I have him on my Facebook. He's still around, but that would be somebody I would love for you to improvise with in a conversation and do some gospel according to jazz on your channel, and see how the two of you could dialogue about this whole concept that you were talking about tonight. Thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, I just Googled that. I'm gonna see how this pans out. All right, it is 8:33. Do we have any latent comments that need to be expressed?
Yeah, you guys are the coolest people in the world. We have truck drivers, and I think Arnold's running a CNC machine or a lathe or something like that in the middle of this. This is literally insane.
It's a mold machine, plastic molding.
Wow.
Plastic molding. Can we submit orders, requests? I don't need that. All right. Wow, this has been a great session. This has been a lot of fun. I'm a little sad that it's over. What any final comments from anybody? Any more thoughts we got to get out?
Yeah,
All
there's
right,
an engine part, so you might need that.
Engine parts. I like that. And when we come back together, yeah, we're at 24. And so next week we are at 25 and we're going to keep going. I have some notes there we're going to get with. So I would encourage, everyone in this little chat session, and also everyone at home is watching the YouTube feed, read through those passages and come up with some notes. Be ready to share some of your thoughts on those things and really try to see through the lens of Paul's nested and cascading arguments through the book of Ephesians and through the lens of verses 13 through 16, like a game B mentality of seeing things, where you have to up-regulate your capacity so that you can participate in this edification model and do it. The capacity to do it, and then your willingness to do it. Right. So that's where we're going next. And so I want everybody to look ahead and read the text and see what that's about. We had some people in the comments who were, I don't know, a little disoriented at first with what we're doing here. So we're next week, Ephesians 4, starting at verse 25 and following. All right, guys, it's been wonderful chatting with y'all. I've really enjoyed y'all's comments, and I'm excited. I feel motivated, Ruth, about what's happened. All right, guys, peace out. Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah.
See y'all next week.
Bye for now.
Ciao.